One of the most important things that citizens do in a democracy is vote. And protecting that right to vote, your right to go to the polls to select the people that are going to represent you in our government, is critically important. It's been a source of struggle in this country, and it continues to be one. Up until the Civil War, we of course had slavery, and a large segment of our population was not allowed to vote. Blacks simply could not have access to the poll. And interestingly enough, women didn't have access to the polls either. Their battles and their struggles were often linked together, and women were very critical in the struggle for blacks to secure the right to vote. People mistakenly believe, however, that the end of the Civil War and the end of slavery brought the right to vote to African Americans, and that's not true. We continue to have decades and decades of discrimination and efforts to discourage people from going to the polls. And if you don't let people vote, you're denying their voice in our government. It wasn't until the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that citizens all across the country were given the right to vote, and we universally eliminated practices of discrimination. We had silly things in place like something called the grandfather clause that said that you could vote unless, of course, your grandfather couldn't vote. And if your grandfather couldn't vote, you can't vote. Well, for blacks, their grandfathers couldn't vote, so in effect that denied them the opportunity to go to the polls. And you would think that we'd be past those struggles, but even today there's concerns over voting rights. Many states are now adopting legislation that will require the presentation of an identification card at the polling place in order to get a ballot. That may sound innocuous enough, but the reality is there's a lot of citizens, particularly poor individuals, people that don't own cars, people that don't have homes, that have no need for a state identification or a driver's license, and therefore may not be allowed to vote. We'll continue to have struggles in this country over the right to vote, but it's one of the most important battles that we will face. The right to voice your opinion by choosing the elected official that you want to serve you in government is something that's critically important to all of us, and having universal access to the ballot is the way to ensure that you have your voice.